You're listening to Nutrition Matters Podcast with Paige Smathers, registered dietitian nutritionist. Hey everyone, it's Paige, your favorite nutrition podcaster and dietitian. Nutrition Matters Podcast explores what really matters in nutrition and health with a sensitive and realistic approach. This podcast relies on the support of listeners like you and needs donations to keep this project running. To help support the podcast, please consider making a donation at paigesmothersrd.com/podcast. If you find this episode interesting, engaging, or helpful in your life, please consider donating, sharing with friends and family, and leaving a review on iTunes. You can leave a review about this podcast straight from your podcast app. Search Nutrition Matters Podcast, click Reviews, and then write a review. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Paige Smathers RD if you'd like to have a little more food for thought. Thank you for listening. Hey everyone, I'm so glad you're here joining me for another episode of Nutrition Matters Podcast. My name is Paige Smathers and I am your host. Today I am sharing a conversation that I had with Tracey Brown, who is a registered dietitian who's done a lot of her own supervision and continuing work and learning in the field of somatic nutrition therapy, as well as like embodiment and a lot of really interesting ways of looking at the field of nutrition. And she has so many amazing things to say in this episode that you're going to want to listen to. We talk about the idea of how she came to her professional work, what she does with her clients. We give really practical ideas of what you can do kind of today to start heading in the right direction or to continue heading in the right direction with building body trust and better health. And we talk about how it's really all about the little things. So you're going to want to definitely listen to this entire episode. It's a really good one with Tracey. Before we get into that, I just want to make sure that all of you know about a few things that are available to you. If you like what you hear on the podcast and you'd like to have a place to discuss things a little bit further, feel free to join us over in the Nutrition Matters podcast community on Facebook. Just type that into the search box and then request to join the group and I will approve you. And if you like this kind of approach to nutrition and health and want to learn how to take it lots of steps further, go ahead and check out my online course. That might be a good fit for you. This is a 10-week online course that helps kind of guide you from this idea of, okay, I know that chronic dieting doesn't work. It hasn't gotten me to where I want to be, but I still feel like I don't know how to get to that intuitive eating place or that place of trusting my body or that place of being at peace with food and my body. So if you're feeling like that resonates with you and you'd like to check out what the course is all about, head on over to paigesmothersrd.com/course and see if it might be a good fit for you. You can also read about some of the other course members and their experience with the program to see, if it might be a good fit. And I'm always happy to, answer an email or a phone call if you'd like to chat with me about whether or not you're a good fit for the course. So go ahead and check that out and then reach out to me if you need some help with it from there. Okay, so again, I'm so glad you're here to hear from Tracey Brown and our conversation about how building trust and better health through the little things is totally possible, and it's something that you can start or continue doing today, right now, in this moment. So enjoy this conversation, and thanks again for being here. Well, hello, Tracey Brown. Welcome to Nutrition Matters Podcast.
Hi, Paige. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is going to be so fun. I'm been kind of like talking with you online for like a while now, and it's just fun to finally meet you almost in person and just have a chat with you about your story and what you do. And I'm just so excited to hear what you have to say today. So yeah, thanks again for being here.
Oh, again, like I said, thank you. And this is the beauty of the online world now. We can get so much connection in places where it just wasn't available or possible. And just to be able to have a place of connection, and whether it's all of what I say or even one little nugget of what we talk about, brings you some peace or some hope, then, that's the reason we're doing this. So, yeah, thank you. There are good benefits to the internet, and this is one of them.
True, true. It's not all good, but it can be a good
Right,
tool, right?
right, exactly.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, so I don't even really know where this conversation is going to go, but I kind of almost like it that way. I like to just kind of explore you and figure out like what you do and what brought you here, and then also kind of like getting into what you really like to specialize in and what you feel like you're really good at talking about, what you're really passionate about. So that's sort of my general idea of where we're going, which is kind of, I'm not sure, but I like it that way. So
Yeah.
let's go ahead and just start off talking a little bit about what brought you to your professional work today. How'd you get there?
So thank you. I guess I'll kind of start from where I'm at and then unpack just real quick and then unpack that to the beginning. So I'm a somatic nutrition therapist, intuitive eating, health at every size, oriented dietitian, and body image coach. And how I got to all that is probably like everybody's journey, lots of ups and downs. So what I will say is that just, growing up, I did have a pretty good relationship with food, but what my struggles were just a lot of high sensitivity. So really struggling with, what's again, I was a very existential kid. Like, okay, what's the point of all this, and why people treat each other this way? And then I'm just trying to build a story of like, hey, how do people struggle with food when like they might not consider themselves having like these maybe really terrible things happening to them or for them, because in life we have little T's and big T's, and sometimes the little T's combined with our T's, I mean traumas, are stacked up enough and without enough support to turn into troubles later in life. And so that's kind of my story, is that everything from the outside looks pretty good, but I'm very, I guess it's sensitive and really tuning into every little strife and struggle of everyone else, and then me negotiating what's mine and what's not. And so I was this like perfect looking kid on the outside, but really internally just struggling to make sense of everything, including life. And so, like, I have, loving family, all those kind of things, but like, we all come from people who've got their own stuff. And so when you're tuning into that, it can feel pretty confusing, and you do all kinds of things like become perfectionistic or very vigilant about doing the right thing. And so honestly, by the time I got into high school, and of course, none of us are in a vacuum. So of course, I had family around me that were, body insecure and dieting and saying those things out loud as if others, the little ones, weren't listening. So even if it wasn't about me, I start to think, oh, maybe this will someday be about me. So I better watch out. And this is,
Yeah, I totally relate to that.
yeah. So 8, 9 years old, those seeds get planted. So it's one of those questions when you work with people like me or with Paige, and if you ever get asked, like, when was the first time you thought about food or weight? It's not usually about when the first time you went on a diet or you started binging in your room. It's like you were 5 and you heard people talking about other people's bodies, or you were 8 and, you were compared to your brother or sister about your body size, and it wasn't meant to be harmful, but it was. And so you can see, if you look back, like where those influences, come from. And most people have like these little memories. So anyway, by the time I'm 16, I have a raging eating disorder. And very, very luckily, I say luckily, I grew up literally in a town of 1,000 people. And the town next to me had 30-something thousand, and they have like they had like 1 or 2 outpatient dietitians in the whole place. And she happened to be, for some miracle, more body positive and less like, here's your meal plan and you have to eat this way and eat more food. And it was one of those things when I remember what the game changer was for me is I was struggling to eat like extra things maybe in my meal plan or something to get more connected to my body signals. And everything was so rigid in my head about the rules. One day she said, if you want to have 3 of whatever it was in a day, you can. And when she said that, I'm like, oh, that feels right. That feels like home. And that helped me tremendously, just to know that there's not a wrong or right way to do things. So flash forward, I still keep working through recovery. And one of the reasons I went to school to be a dietitian, because I wanted to feel like I felt when I worked with her, which was just 100% accepted, whatever I was going to do. So I had therapy and all those kind of things, but it was that attunement and that permission to be and feel how I felt, and just to be fully here and somebody be fully present to that without any agenda or whatever, is what I wanted to be. It took the form of being a dietitian because when in the 18-year-old brain, it's the things aren't, you're not able to see the big picture of what you really wanted. I just felt how I felt. So anyway, I continue to work through, like exercise addiction, definitely issues in college too, and some restricting and binging, but so much better. And by the end of college, I was in this dilemma of like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't believe in most of what I'm learning. I'm going to have to unlearn this to ever practice the way I want to practice, which I didn't. There wasn't a name for it. There wasn't a name for, again, this is like late 90s, so we're talking, the book Intuitive Eating was out, but I didn't have a copy of it. I had one book with Breaking Free from Emotional Eating, I think, and that was it. And so all I knew is like, I'm going to have to figure out a different way to use this degree and then use this license to help people, or just get a new profession. And that was my two options. And so that took me down the long path of, getting training and supervision, and like how to, teach intuitive eating, not just from like, here's the book and here's the principles, but from a very embodied kind of, this is how you live this way, and here are some of the barriers that keep you from that. And one of them is obviously the cultural stuff around, basically you're not valuable or acceptable if you don't look a certain way, and throw in some healthism around that. And people, it's easy to see how people get pretty confused and disconnected from themselves. So that was always my goal, is like, how to help people come home to themselves. That's kind of my tagline, to learn how to trust themselves and really, find their way back to it, and really believe that's their greatest tool. Because if you're able to not only listen to yourself and really trust what's coming from inside of you, it's like the doorway into everything else in your life. It's, if you can do that with your food, you can do that with, what do I want to live? Who do I want to be with? Like, do I still love this job? You can tune into that and listen to that more, versus having your head be so in control of everything.
I've thought about that a lot, and I think that there is a lot of power in using food and your relationship with it, and also your relationship with your body, and maybe struggles in those regards, to kind of unlock some of these really powerful kind of like higher truths that are really hard to learn just sitting around thinking about it, like philosophizing, for lack of a better word, about, trust and balance and whatever, all of those really powerful abstract truths that, when we struggle with food, or when we struggle with our bodies, it's hard when you're in the middle of it, and it's really difficult to kind of see through it. But on the other side, not that there necessarily is like an after, but just when you move through that struggle and you can look back on it and say, wow, that really taught me so much about so many things that I wouldn't have been able to learn had I not gone through that. And look, I've been able to apply that to relationships and jobs and big life decisions. And I think that in some ways it's almost a way to create some gratitude for the struggles that we go through.
Absolutely. It really, and I'd never expect anybody to feel this way, year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of, going from some kind of like, chronic dieting or disordered eating to feeling like, I'm so grateful that happened to me.
Right. Yeah. It takes a while.
But it takes a while to get there. But there's a level of, for me, it's like, wow, I've had all these opportunities to get to know myself in such deep levels that, and continue to do that. It's like, there's not a finish line. There's just, if that's the path you're on, that's the path you're on. And you use that tenacity to be able to say, like, I got through that. So this thing too there's a way to use those skills of attunement and learning how to become frankly, more comfortable with being uncomfortable, meaning, okay, so that was really hard. Remember that, when I had to sit with my emotions, or I had to, either from sit with my emotions, not to emotional eat, or to not to restrict. Like, you were able to do that. You are building literally neural pathways to learn how to reference from that for anything else that comes up.
So what about the opposite though, Tracy? Like, what if someone's listening and they're in the throes of it, and they're, I could see how a person who's in the throes of these struggles could be feeling like, oh, well, I haven't figured out how to trust myself, or I haven't figured out how to be in tune with these things. And and then seeing how, just with the same logic we were just talking about, how that can affect so many other aspects of life as well, right? If you don't trust yourself with your eating, how do you trust yourself with any big life decision?
That's right. And I think that's why we try to live, it's so hard, because you're trying to solve every challenge in life through your brain, and we have all these other intelligences. But going back to your thought is, of course not. I would say, of course, you don't feel like you can trust your body because you've been so disconnected from it. And that's where these really tiny little things that we do build up to big things. So if you're listening to this and you're still struggling, honestly, to eat 3 meals a day, let's just pick an example. You being able to pick a time of day where that feels more tolerable to do that. And I'll talk about what a resource is in a second, but have resources to be able to manage what comes up as you do that, maybe. And you feel what comes up from you, or the inner critic talk that comes up, or the whatever we label it, have the resources to work with that. And you're not going to necessarily trust your body, but it's more about you're building, again, more neural pathways to oh, this new thing I'm doing by day 30 or day 40, if we're fairly consistent, doesn't feel like the same charge it did at the beginning. So the little things do matter, even though you might feel like, well, I don't trust myself, so what's the point? It's it matters. If you need to have some planning to help yourself eat more food, if you need to, if that's not your struggle, if it's more about learning where your edge is with your fullness, it could be that it does matter that you take a 30-second pause just to check in a little bit more and see what you feel. You might still keep eating, and emotional eating is not the worst thing that could ever happen to us in our life, even though sometimes we feel that way. But the little things that we're able to do matter, and it does build trust. It might take time to build body trust, but I think about the empowerment that comes from that. Like, oh my gosh, look at you. For the last month, you were eating 0 breakfast, or you were always overeating at dinner and you felt like you could never stop. You had 3 days a week where none of that stuff happened, or you had 4 days, or maybe it still happened most days, but the intensity's 50% less. I mean, that's something that's real, and you did that. So we can't undo the fact that when your brain's telling you can't do this, well, you did it.
Yeah, Tracy, that's a beautiful thought. I love the sentiment of the little things really do matter in this regard, and that's often what I spend a lot of time in session with my clients about is reflecting, having them tell me what happened during their week or their month or whatever it might be, and hearing them verbalize their thoughts around food and their experiences and their behaviors. And so often what I'm doing in that case is to help people reflect on, wait a minute, this is highly improved from even a week ago, or
Absolutely.
Gosh, do you remember where you were a month before today? This is definitely better. And so my point that I wanted to make is, if you are feeling like, well, what's the point? I can't trust myself, or I'm in the throes of this, or it's so discouraging, maybe just take a few minutes to really take an honest look at what's going on. And I guarantee you'll see some things that have gotten better if you take some time to just reflect on it. We don't always do that.
We don't give ourselves enough credit, because most people who I know that have struggled with eating, or who work with people who struggle with eating, are brilliant. And we have these high expectations about this is the way it needs to be, and I should be there yesterday. And it's really hard and actually humbling to be able to look at the small things because we're not used to that. And this is old programming that we're not used to, like, oh, I went from zero breakfast to I could drink something and then now I can eat something and then I can eat a little bit more and trust that and nothing bad like in my life happens for me because our systems are really hyper vigilant around kind of like looking for the worst thing. It's like, well, let's look at actually what's good that's happening from these risks that you're doing, and also remind them that the attunement to another and to yourself also builds trust and also builds, again, some like feelings of competency, like, oh, look at me, I'm slowing down enough to do that thing, and I've done it for 1 day, 5 days, 30 days, whatever, fairly consistently. Change is hard. And if you can look back, I always have people look back, weekly, monthly, every 3 months, and like accumulate all that. And that's the thing I remind people, you can't go back. You can never unlearn this stuff.
Yeah, I love that, Tracy. That's great. So tell me, I want to hear more about something you said in the beginning when you were talking about who you are and what you do for work. You mentioned that you're a somatic nutrition therapist. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm. So I'll tell a little background about how I got to that. So, we've all experienced, I think that those of us who do this work, and hopefully you all that are listening, this will make a little sense to you that, some people take our, we help people kind of have some more, competency around their eating, whether first do some planning or then planning and then intuitive eating, and kind of pull the chaos out of all that and build some grounding. And some people, that might take us, 6 months or a year and a half or 2 years, and then they're pretty good to go and off about, they're still having to, navigate living on this planet with, food phobia and fat phobia and all that, but they have a really great foundation and they're off living. And then we have some people, and if anybody's listening to this, there's nothing weird or wrong with you, but your nervous system needs more help usually. And what I found is that like some people, would stay longer and they would know a lot. They knew so much about all health at every size and body positivity, and they even believed in it and they were trying to live it, and they would go along doing pretty good. And then something would happen to where it felt like they just couldn't access that in their brain. And this was about 5 or 6 years ago that I'm like, what do my people need? Because some people take everything and they go off to the races, and some people struggle longer. And why is that? And what's happening? And what I found that there were some similarities with, it was hard to keep attuned when they didn't feel safe in their bodies. And so that can happen.
Wait, really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
You keep using the word attuned, and I just want to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that everybody knows what you mean by that when you say it. So
So when I say attuned, I use that word for not only hunger, fullness signals, but also just this inner knowing about like what feels like with sleep, how much do I need, and what feels better to me, and food choices too. And then I also kind of like, again, a big umbrella term for attuned to, who feels good to be around and what feels good to be doing. And when I say good, I don't mean like, oh, I'm always so happy. It's like what feels safe, what feels like, okay, this is for me. So it goes with food, but also everything. So I started studying trauma work and the work of like Peter Levine. I'll just drop some names just so people know if they want to go look this stuff up. But Peter Levine and Stephen Porges and all these people study neurobiology and what happens in our bodies when we're chronically under stress, fight, flight, or freeze. Because that's what I was noticing in sessions with people, that they would get to this place where they're so high and so anxious that you could have a session with them, but I could feel that they weren't really with me, kind of tuning out or checking out, or they would agree with me, but I could feel that it wasn't really getting in or resonating. And so I started studying that. And what I started doing in my sessions was taking time at the beginning or throughout it when I noticed a shift in people's mood or whatever, just to take some time to reorient to like the room or in their body, somewhere that felt safe. Because when you don't feel safe in your body, meditation isn't always that helpful, because your body is like running from cheetahs in your mind. or you're so shut down that like you might not even be fully in the room. So I started just basically learning techniques to be able to help people feel safe enough to be more present, and then we could go further with the body image or the food work and do that in the drops that they felt they could tolerate and be safe about. And I've been doing this, and I find that, you know, even though people still have little moments or big moments of feeling really stressed that feel overwhelming, they have tools they can use to help not make it so big or struggle for so long that they can get back on track with their food if they have a quote unquote bad day where they literally struggle to eat or struggle not to binge or whatever's happening, because they know mentally what to do, but when their nervous system is so dysregulated, they don't know really how to do the things they want to do. So in a nutshell, that's what that is. It's basically about learning how to feel safer in your body, to where then you can get your brain more on board to help you, like, oh yeah, that's right. Like, I get groceries. I do that every Tuesday, and that's good for me, and I want to do that, versus I can't go to the store, it's too scary, or I don't want to, or I dread it, or I just haven't done it in 2 weeks, even though they know that they want to. And what I found doing some of this work, it helps just dramatically reduce shame, and that's something that's really important to me. And when we walk around with chronic shame about like how we're behaving or what we're thinking and what we're feeling, it's really hard to want to take care of ourselves because we just feel too bad.
Right. I mean, shame is not productive, right? It just leads to despair and discouragement and screw it all mentality.
Perfect. That's exactly what people struggle with. I'm like, well, screw it. This is not working. I've tried this. Intuitive eating, like, whatever. People get kind of hopeless. And that's why this work is so important to me around just shame resolution and shame actually heals a lot through attunement with another. So that's why the relationship with a really attuned person, like you or myself or their therapist or whatever, is, gosh, so important to why people get better. It's not always the magical things we think we're saying. It's, I'm really with you here, and I'm not going anywhere, and you could decide how much you trust me or not, but building that trust. And so when we do that with each other, it starts to actually, in the frontal part of our brain has something called mirror neurons. And so when somebody's really attuning to you, you're able to start to do that for yourself. So for example, I have this exercise called rain stick I do. And essentially it's, I know you guys can't see this, but it's an exercise where you put your hand up above your head, you breathe in, and as you kind of push the air out like it's a shh sound. And a lot of my clients, they don't even do it, but they watch me do it. And they can feel the shift in their nervous system, like, they might take it down a couple notches to where, now we can talk about food. And then maybe next time they join me and we do it together. And then maybe they feel safe enough to do it on their own to where before their meals, so it brings the anxiety down. Because that kind of, it's just one of the many things that I have people do to try to help their nervous system feel like, okay, I can do this thing. I can go buy new clothes because I'm not so scared to go to the store by myself, or even with another person, or cook the food, get the groceries, eat the meal, stop a little sooner and check in a little bit more to see how I'm feeling.
That's so powerful. And for me, one of my favorite things to do, if I remember, and that's sometimes the tricky part, is just remembering to do these things. But there's so much power in just taking a nice deep breath too. It's just like so simple, and something you can do in any situation. But it just, you realize, oh, I haven't really been breathing in the last few minutes. Maybe that's part of why I feel so out of sorts. Yeah.
Out of sorts, exactly. So when you're really anxious, sometimes it's hard to take a breath because it actually increases the ability to feel like hyperventilating. So sometimes that's not the thing. It's more about, can you notice your breath and not change it? Just actually notice that you're breathing. Or I do a lot of grounding work, which is, hey, do you notice your feet? Which foot has more contact with the floor? Your left or your right, and where do you notice more of that contact? And that's something we'll spend just 5 minutes doing. And then we can come to like, okay, and how are you doing now? What are you noticing in your body? And And then we can work at, sometimes we go further with that and build some more stability, or sometimes that's just enough to like, okay, I'm ready now. We can talk.
Yeah,
Or,
and for someone listening who's like, okay, why are these two dietitians talking about
mm-hmm.
grounding work and breathing and things like and shame? Like how is that in their scope of practice? Or how does that matter to carbs, fats, and proteins? Like what would you say to that?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that like I know that people want to know a lot about that stuff, and people don't come to see us who want to heal their relationship with food and need more food talk in terms of protein, carbs, and fat. Sometimes that's really important and people need that information. But when we're talking about relationship with food, this is like really old stuff. You know, if you've been shamed about your eating when you were 5 or 10 or 16, and all those really those times when we are still developing autonomy, basically from like 0 to about, depending on what the research is, between 16 and early 20s, we're still building our sense of autonomy and like me-ness, and I know what I need. And so a lot of times for our clients to be able to do that with their food, we have to like mirror that back to them. This is how you do it. So if I'm going to be more effective with helping you with intuitive eating, or if one of your goals is to break free from emotional eating being your go-to to cope with any emotion, I mean, part of my job is to help you be able to feel enough of what you're feeling. Is this physical hunger or emotional hunger? Separating the two out. And so you have basically, I call it a basket to put each in. Like, okay, let's work on your physical hungers and what those feel like and do the nuance of that. And now, you know, either bring that work to your therapist, or it could be, you know, some basic, you know, what are some resources you have to deal with that? Because I don't want you to just leave with nothing. Okay, so I'm saying here's what your body's saying, and here's what the emotions are, which by the way are in the same spot. Our emotions are in our bodies. So non-dietitians are always going to run into being tangled up in people's emotion, because we feel our emotions from the neck down for the most part. And so we have to help people discern what's what. We don't always have
Absolutely.
the answers to what they should do about all those things, and we can do general self-care.
Right.
But in terms of like, you know, how you're going to fix your relationship or whatever, or past trauma, we're not going to like, this is what we're going to do with that. But we
Right.
certainly can help people uncouple what is physical and what is emotional sensation in the body. And so, you know, if we're talking about food and body image stuff, we are talking about shame
Yes,
every
I
single
agree.
time. We are
And if
talking
you're
about
not
shame.
talking about that, you're missing the point, you know, for people. And you might even be making things worse for a person. So the reason I bring that up, Tracy, is I just, you know, I think a lot of people are kind of surprised when I say, you know, it's not really about carbohydrate, fat, and protein in session typically. And I actually said that to someone just yesterday, and she kind of looked at me like so confused, kind of like tilted her head and was like, "Wait, what? Well, then what do you do?" and
Mm,
and it was a little bit surprising. Just you know, I think I see things very similarly to how you're talking, and I just it's like if you really want to help someone get to the root of what's going on for them with food, we need to help separate, you know, this type of physical feeling from this type of emotional feeling. We need to help
mm-hmm,
someone get in touch with what that feels like, and identifying, you know, various things that might be causing them to do dysfunctional things around food or exercise and or other areas of self-care. And so,
mm-hmm,
you know, if you're just sticking to, and another point is that education about facts and figures and science, I think, is so important and
mm-hmm.
a really big part of what we do, but doesn't necessarily change someone's behavior, you know?
Absolutely. So I'm glad you said that. I would say I was trying to quantify it. Like, how much do I actually talk about literally protein, carbs, and fats? You know, I don't know. I can't even, honestly, probably 5%, maybe. Sometimes at the beginning, a lot more in terms of like the food science. Like, how does the body work? How does our body use food? What's actually happening? What would be some outliers of that happening? That all occurs, definitely is. And that's part of, um, helping people, again, rebuild some trust in their bodies, knowing like, okay, this is actually how it works, not like how the internet says it might work.
Right, dispelling some myths. That can be a really
Right.
important part of like wrapping your head around the idea of like, oh, I truly can, eat this food that I've been told I can't.
Absolutely. And I just want to say something that matters a lot to me is that we've had 100 something years of telling people how to eat and it ain't working. So I think the basics are enough for all of us to know, to be honest. Because if we can use the basics of what we know to be helpful in terms of like, let's say a higher fiber diet, except there's always outliers for that. That's not always the best thing for people to be doing. But in general, and finding pleasurable ways to move and having community and having purpose. And I'm trying to think of some of the others that I think is super important to health. And yeah, knowing a way to sleep and modulating our stress levels. Those are the basics, and they're big, and that's enough. If you tap into all those things from the basic level, doing all those things and knowing the basic about all that will dramatically probably improve somebody's health in their life. And so beyond that, we're getting lost in the weeds, because what's really more important is to do all those things, you have to have a relationship with yourself. And to get there, it's okay, so let's do the basics around dispelling some myths. I'm just talking about what we do in session. And then it's like looking at your relationship with that information, your relationship with your body, your relationship with what you think everybody else thinks about your body. Because we are totally in the realm of our scope of practice to talk about food, weight, body, all those things. And so do other things going to be entwined in that? Totally. And so it's part of our job to really discern all that for what we know we can do and help people, and then whatever is like beyond our scope, we're like, this is for your therapist, please make sure you mention it.
Oh, we uncovered this part that's really important to you that definitely bring up in therapy, or here's a referral. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
I think that that's an important thing to kind of talk about and help people understand, why this podcast is called Nutrition Matters. And yeah, like how much have I actually talked about like the science of nutrition on this podcast? I don't even know how to quantify that either. Why do most of my conversations with my guests turn into conversations about shame and conversations about resiliency and conversations about intuition and trust and these kind of like big themes of life? Why do my conversations turn into that and not carbs, fats, and proteins? Well, because I think that those minutia of nutrition can often bog you down, not really be helpful, sometimes exacerbate issues around food. And, really food is life, right? Food gives us life. Yeah. So how are we not talking about the important things of life when we're talking about food? Well, we are, right? I mean, it all connects. And I think it's just such a beautiful part of, again, what kind of circling back to what we talked about in the beginning. That's why we can use our relationship with food and perhaps our struggles with it to uncover and unlock some of the most beautiful truths of life.
Absolutely. And the thing is, Paige, we are the ones to be doing this, because there are a million other podcasts that could be talking about minutia of macros. We know, at least from my own experience, that for me and every body has everybody has their own way of like what their drumbeat is. But for me, it's like that feels like distraction from my life, to be honest. I know, we know enough, and most of our listeners, we know enough how to feed ourselves well. The thing is, like, what's keeping us from wanting to do that? And it has so much to do with like feeling lovable and worthy and attuned enough, and feeling like you're worthy enough to be attuned enough to do that, and feeling like you're safe enough to do that. And so we are really reparenting ourselves and each other in that kind of way, which is why this is ours to talk about, because we know that for people to be as free as personally I feel, and other people who have been through this, and maybe you too, it's if you really, really want to be free, we've got to start at the beginning, like you said, with true nourishment, which is, what's going on with me? How do I feel? Can I trust that? Am I Am I willing? And then everything else is just kind of play details. Like, oh yeah, I want to play around with my nutrition because maybe I want to optimize something, or maybe there's this thing that I could, tinker with some more anti-inflammatory stuff. But you're doing it because it feels good, and it's not a head thing about it. It's just like, yeah, I could do that, but if I didn't, it's not the end of the world. So you have freedom around it, but you have to be at this other place first, which is, I'm attuned, and I know the motive around this. This isn't based out of fear. I think that's what I was trying to get to. If we want to get to the place where any food or movement or whatever we're doing with our life isn't like based out of, oh my gosh, if I don't do this, then I can't be okay.
That's super reactive and super not great for our mental health. I mean, that's a hard place to be coming at supposedly quote unquote healthy behaviors, right? That's not very healthy to come at it from that perspective. And the way I see it, just to add on to what you've said, is you really can't get to a place where you're applying gentle principles of nutrition science unless you're coming from a place of I appreciate and love and want to take good care of my body. And you're coming from that place. When you're coming from the place of, I want to manipulate my body, I'm so mad at it, I want to punish it, I can't, if I don't do this, I won't be okay, like you were saying.
Right.
You're just, that nutrition science information is likely going to just make that cycle and what's the word, kind of obsession and circular logic, like worse.
Right. Well, what it becomes is and I say this with all love and total understanding of why we do it. We know that like being hyper-focused on food or weight or movement or health or whatever is really a code language. It's a code language for I feel uncomfortable. And so we're trying to use all of those external pieces as a way to manage what feels internally uncomfortable, chaotic, not allowable, whatever.
Yeah, and Tracy, this is bringing up an interesting thing, and if you don't mind, let's just go there for a second. So I had someone reach out to me and let me know that they really don't like my podcast because they think that I'm just saying, health doesn't matter, eat whatever you want. And I know I think that, there could have been an episode where it was maybe more along those lines. I don't think the body of what I'm saying is that way, but I do recognize that someone might just listen to one episode and kind of say, that's not my thing. And I understand that. But just to clarify that, I do think that nutrition matters. Obviously, that's
right.
That's the title of this podcast. I just think it doesn't matter at the expense of other areas of what makes you feel whole and well, right? And so typically someone who's going to be listening to a podcast, searching in iTunes saying, okay, I want to learn about nutrition, usually they're not really needing more nutrition information. They're needing a little bit of balanced information to be able to say, hey, it's okay to also consider your mental health when trying to work on better nutrition. It's okay to consider how much time and energy your pursuit of quote unquote health with your nutrition is taking from you. And there needs to be a balance that feels right for you. And your balance might look a little bit different than my balance. I know for me, some structure of what I need to do to feel my best self with my eating is I need to go grocery shopping and I need to plan dinners. And I need to eat fruits and veggies throughout my day. And some days I don't really eat fruits and vegetables because things get away from me and I say, good thing my body likes averages. I have a gentle concern for balance and variety and moderation. And I do think those things are important. But I also don't think that they should take the place of adequate rest or time with your family or leisure time or having a fun night out where you're just, enjoying a great meal with your spouse or your partner or your friend. So thanks for letting me take a few minutes to say that. But what would you add to that if people give you that feedback?
I would just add to that The principles really behind this paradigm shift aren't about like nutrition doesn't matter. It's really about what's its quote unquote proper place. We that's the thing, that we're so used to having this, giving food and nutrition, it's all or nothing. It's very black and white. It's either I don't care about it at all, or I care so much that like I can't let something from the microwave or from the county fair pass my lips because I'll die, or it has some kind of magic power. Because I see a lot of magical abilities put on food to either ruin my life or save me. And it just doesn't have that much power. So it's not that nutrition doesn't matter. And the reason I feel, and probably you feel confident saying that, of course that matters. Tune into yourself. Like, how do you feel after so many days of eating a certain kind of food? And that'll be different for everybody. For me, when I first learned how to like do some habituation, I didn't eat fruit and vegetables for 6 months because one, I was just so repulsed by them because I really abused them in pursuit of trying to manipulate my body. So it's like I had no desire to eat them. I was so repulsed by them. I ate them in really disgusting ways before, so I was a little bit traumatized by them, to be honest, by what I was doing. So I had to give myself permission, not just in this grand experiment of like, I'm going to trust that if I want to eat these again, and if my body truly needs to eat these, then it will tell me. It was kind of like jumping off the cliff. Like, okay, if my body really needs this, then it'll tell me, and it did eventually. And I learned to eat them in little ways without triggering myself to feel like this was a diet again. It was just...
Because that can totally happen, Tracy. That's an important point. Mm-hmm. When you've abused fruits and vegetables or some type of food, and used it to try to manipulate your body in pursuit of that, it can be very difficult to reintroduce those and not have that just like take you right back to where you were.
Absolutely. So I'll share with people. So if people want to use this today and use it, it's awesome. So what exactly I did was I had to really, this is my first experiment. I was starting to think about having an apple. And I thought, okay, do you really want an apple, or are you just freaked out because you haven't had fruit and vegetables in 6 months and you think you're going to die of cancer tomorrow? And the answer was, today I think I genuinely want one. So this is all self-talk. So for those of you who are in this process actively, you are not crazy for talking to yourself all day. This is how it goes, about like what you're going to do or not going to do. So I was like, okay, I do want an apple. And then I could hear my diet voice click back in, oh, let's go get a big bag of apples. And then you can have one like every day. And I was like, okay, stop. No, I said an apple. So I literally went to the store, got my other food, and bought one apple. And that was it. And I told myself, if I do not have to eat this, and if you eat it and you really want more, we'll go back tomorrow if you really want another apple, or the next day, or 2 days from now, whatever. And so I had the apple, and I was like, oh, that was pretty good. And I had some thought again, like, oh, go get another one. Do I want another one? Nah, not really. So I didn't. And I think the next week I went back to the store again and checked back in. Do you want more? Yeah, I did. So I remember this because it was such like a vivid experience of like, okay, so I got 2 apples, a pear, and a little bag of green beans. Because I went around the whole section. Do I want any of this? And would that feel triggering for me to get that? And I didn't make myself get more. I actually ate, I think, 3/4 of all that in that 1 week. And that's how I progressed with eating them. And then I never made myself, eat something even though I bought it. And then I just kind of kept tuning into that. And of course, that was like 15 years ago. So I have weeks just like you, Paige, where it's like, I don't think I've eaten fruit and vegetables in like 3 days. I'm kind of wanting some broccoli. That's weird. Oh, well, that makes sense because I haven't had anything. Okay. So how do I want to cook it in a way that's really enjoyable? And then that's the self-care. So I just want people listening to this to know that we do care about nutrition. However, we want to do it in a way where it feels good, like you actually want to do it, versus, oh, I should because of either my weight or my health, because you're not helping your health by forcing things down your gullet that you don't want.
Right. And there's more to promoting health than talking about specific nutrients or specific foods. And I think just broadening our concept of what promotes health and really recognizing all the various aspects of life that are health promoting for you is just an important perspective to keep in mind as you're, earnestly and really in your best, from the best place possible, like trying to pursue, a better relationship with food and perhaps looking into nutrition concepts and nutrition science. I think there's nothing wrong with that, but just take a giant step back, because we can get so hyper focused on one small area that then ironically can actually detract from our health when we do that, right? So
absolutely.
This is about health. It's just not about, and health is just more than very specific things we're putting into our mouths. It's what are we doing over a long period of time with our eating, but also, all of these other areas of health that we've already mentioned many times today. So.
Absolutely. So it's, if we don't know that, I don't think we always label ourselves this way, but we're very holistic in our practice, because, when people show up, it's, what shows up for me today versus, okay, well, so here's what you should do. And it's a disempowering thing to I think, and I'm really feel really strong on this stance, that I think it's really disempowering to here's what you should do, taking people's power away. Because that's what we do when we say, here's your meal plan, have a nice day.
Shoulds are hard.
Yeah. So, we come about this in a way that's really totally rewiring, our own systems personally, but then everybody else. We are teaching, how do you be your own nutrition expert? How do you be your own expert in your life? And that's how health gets, maximized to the ability and desire we have for that. And nobody's required to even do any of that. But if they want to, here's a way to do it without detracting from other areas of your life.
Okay, so Tracey, I have another question for you. I saw a recent post of yours talking about giving practical ideas for how people can start to decode their self-talk. And I'd love for you to give some examples of what you mean by decoding self-talk, and also, what information and what wisdom they can glean from that experience, and how people can do that.
Oh, beautiful. I love the way you phrase that, just to kind of the point of it. And so probably most people listening who have struggled with food have a lot of talk around, I guess I'm just going to use the word. Basically, people say a lot, I feel fat. Or if they're not using that language, it could be just that really intense desire to I got to eat. So that could mean you were feeling okay, or something was kind of building and it felt so intense you had to go to the drive-thru, or get the dozen donuts and you can't wait till you get home to eat them, kind of feeling. And so when that's happening, and people love to not argue with this, but are you sure? Because this is how I feel. But when people say I feel fat, for example, 100% of the time they're saying I feel uncomfortable. And it doesn't, in my experience, I haven't seen it matter what size they were, whether they weighed 100 pounds or 400 pounds. I feel fat because, fat is actually a descriptor or an energy-rich substance. It's not exactly happy, mad, sad, or afraid. And so when you're saying I feel fat, people are really using code language. And it's the way that we've been taught in our culture. So if you want to feel more confident, more happy, more lovable, whatever, you lose weight. So that's how that has gotten tangled up. And if you think about stereotypes, you could probably list them in your head and get a sheet of paper out. You could say thin equals all the stereotypes that you can think of that pop in your head. Fat equals those. And so when you have body type or body shape connected with characteristics of a person, like happy or sad or whatever, you can see how that really gets coupled. Excuse me. And so the point of decoding I feel fat is to help you, again, uncouple. When you're saying I feel fat, what you're really saying is I feel uncomfortable, and gives you a tool to be able to know what is actually going on for you, instead of blaming your body and diving headfirst into not eating breakfast or driving through the second drive-through when you feel like this is the only thing you can do. It just gives you another option besides those behaviors. And so the reason to do this exercise, and literally you could get a piece of paper out and draw a huge Y on it. At the bottom, you could say, I feel fat. In the middle, you could write, I feel uncomfortable, and kind of know that you have a choice. And then you can have on the left-hand side of the Y what I call food and body talk, which is I'm going to lose weight, restrict, count calories, get on the scale, binge, purge, take diet pills, whatever behaviors we do. Look online and look up stuff, whatever are our specific behaviors that we do or thoughts we have. And then on the right-hand side, basically, I call it where the self-care is it could be problem solving, talking out with a friend. I do a lot of, again, have people make a list of embodied resources they can do in terms of looking around the room and noticing their surroundings, or noticing their breath, or using their feet to get grounded in a meditation, or if it's a more intense, high energy emotion, the things we do, scream into pillows. And you make this long list of things that you can do with what comes up underneath I feel fat. But before we can get there, just acknowledging. So let's say, for example, this is what it would look like. You're in your car and you were feeling okay, but all of a sudden you're headed to work or to class or whatever you're doing, and all of a sudden you feel like your thighs are the size of like the whole car, versus an hour ago when you ate your bagel, you weren't feeling that way. So something has happened. A thought or a feeling has arisen, and immediately we've translated that to the language of food and body. And so to get out of that, we can't really solve whatever feeling or circumstance that is through more food and language talk. A food and body talk, and it needs to be, what's going on? Like, what just happened hypothetically? If something was going on for me or bothering me, what would that be? And honestly, whatever is going to pop up initially is the thing that needs your attention. So you can move away from like the body criticizing or the desire to like binge or restrict or whatever, and more towards what you actually want and need. And so, I want to say something for sometimes the people like, I don't know what's going on. I was okay. Imagine yourself like sitting on our side of the chair and looking at yourself or your life or what's been happening. And if that still doesn't give you any clues to what could be going on, check in with your body. Like, are there places that don't feel comfortable? And if that's the case, like your stomach hurts, or you feel nauseous, or your chest feels tight, or your jaw hurts, you could go in that direction. Just notice like, oh, here's tightness here, or here's this here. And there's inquiry you can do around that, which is staying with those sensations. There is asking your body in those places. It sounds weird, but what does it need? Or is there anything it wants to tell you? Because even doing any of this, and if you don't fully get an answer at the beginning, you are breaking the neural pathway that says, oh, I feel fat, and you believe in that. Even doing those, even if you don't get the answer, or it takes you 10 tries of this to get some clarity, you did something different, which is super powerful. You're building a new neural pathway that gives you another resource to use instead of blaming your body.
Right. Actually, that was going to be my next question, Tracy, was, and this is some of the pushback I get when I explain similar things. People will be like, well, that just sounds like so much work. And so the point being, even if you don't go down, that path of doing every little thing you mentioned, but you just kind of say, oh, I noticed this thought is arising. And normally I would go here, here, and here with that thought, but I'm going to either just let that thought kind of go, or I'm going to kind of just say, what is that thought about? And then look more into what's going on there. Like, even just breaking that cycle can be a really good first step. That doesn't take a lot of time.
No, I'm glad that you said that, because I always tell people I have two versions. Here's the long version, which that was, and the short version is you just having awareness that that's happening. You've already broken that. You've broken that neural pathway that this is what I always do. So you can just say like, oh, I had that thought, and I'm just going to stop and say no to that, or I'll come back to that because I don't have the the time, or really honestly the desire, the energetic ability for that right now, and I can come back to it or let it go. Just being able to disagree with that is really powerful.
Yeah,
So for like a quicker version.
Just
So some,
awareness and
yeah.
just saying, oh, that's coming up for me. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
good to know. And yeah, a step further would be questioning it, but even just awareness, I think, is a really good first step. That even some people will say, well, that even just being aware is a lot of work, but it's kind of your only choice. It's like you got to wake up.
You know what? I heard this quote a couple of weeks ago, um, that it takes the same amount of energy to, in your mind, think about making $1 million that it does to, like, either think about or being aware or not being aware. And I also think about the idea of, um, it takes energy to hate your body. It takes energy to plan your next diet. It takes energy to think about how you should get groceries, but you're not gonna because you don't deserve it. So there's this thing of like,
Oh, totally. There's so many areas where you're likely wasting a lot of time and
right.
energy.
So I say that, and I say that very lovingly. It's like,
Yeah, right.
we're gonna use this brain space and emotional currency for stuff anyway. So what if it was towards your wholeness and your homecoming, and taking and being really fully with yourself? And if that feels like where you feel that feels hard, then it's not really about the time or about the effort. It's, this feels hard. This feels weird. I'm scared to do this because what if I let all this go? And that gets such rich information. Like, even if you don't want to do this, that's good information. Like, what do I feel like would happen if I decoded this thought either quickly or I take, 15 minutes. Like, I get a piece of paper out and do that, because you could do that really quickly. Or it could be even the faster version. If it feels like, oh, I don't want to do that, that's so hard, or it takes a lot of time, like, I hear you. Like, we are not trained to be this introspective in our culture. None of us, I don't know anybody who had parents like that. I mean, I'm trying to be that kind of parent, but I had to learn that. So we're going to use that energy for something. So if you're feeling like it's not usually about that it takes too much time. It's about, like, there's something that feels uncomfortable about doing it for ourselves.
Right. Oh, Tracy, I think that was really, really good. And I'm excited to hear what people think about that advice, because I think whenever we can be practical and say, here are some things you can do in real life, like even starting today or even while you're listening to this podcast, I think there's a lot of power in that. Because in the end, like, we learn by doing, right?
By doing, yeah. So, yeah, when people's like, what do you guys talk about? Nutrition, like, no, you're going to leave every session. It may not be with a worksheet. Sometimes it is, but sometimes on a sticky note, you're going to get, I want you to be aware of blah, 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 because that will create so many shifts if you do that. And even if you don't, that will be good information for what's underneath that to make it more accessible to do that.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. So what do you want to say kind of in conclusion, or is there any kind of holes that we haven't hit on yet so far? I'd love to hear you kind of give any last thoughts.
Okay. We covered so much about what this process looks like, and about, really, we talked a lot about general nutrition without meaning to, which is beautiful, because I think people do get worried. I was worried, like, if I eat what I want when I want, I'll always eat cookie dough. I'm like, maybe for a little bit, but it's not forever. People get worried about, I think, oh my gosh, if I intuitive eat, I'll never stop gaining weight, and I have never ever seen that happen, ever. And I've been doing this 11 years. So I know it's hard to trust that when you're in the midst of it and it feels like a tornado inside, but I just want you to remember that we are born. We are born with the capacity for intuitive eating. Our bodies are programmed to have, like, this settling place for us. It might take us, we can't predict how long that's going to take for that to happen, but know that you're wired for that, without you having to do the doing, which I think sometimes is important to remember. Like, you're not in charge of all this, even though it feels like you have to be. And just kind of, even if it's a mental thing, recognize that the more these little things that we talked about, these little bits of awarenesses or the little exercises we do, build trust in those concepts, if that makes any sense. And then from the body perspective, those of you listening who feel really uncomfortable or really just unsafe in your bodies, know that's for a reason. There's nothing that you're doing wrong to feel that way. It's more about that needs your attention and attunement, usually with somebody to help you build safety in your system, like literally in your nervous system. So there's a lot of neurobiology that goes along with this. So it's not because you're not trying hard enough or that it's hopeless. It's just that we might need some different tools. But it is just like with healing from an eating disorder, tuning up and rewiring your nervous system is totally possible too.
Yeah, I love the message of hope that neuroplasticity brings, where
yes.
you realize like, oh, I can rewire my brain. I think that's so hopeful and so powerful of a concept. And again, the way you do that isn't necessarily like these giant things, because yeah, there is that, but it's also the little things do that as well. And so any little step you can take can make a big difference.
Yeah, I just want to share real briefly about that point is like when I've done a lot of somatic training the last 3 years, and the things that we do that I'm taught, I'm like, really? This makes a big difference. But when you start putting everything together, it's life-changing. Like there are some weeks I'm just doing certain head movements and exercises and really registering these changes. And I have the same feeling, like, really? This is like building that much interoception inside my body, and it does. And so little things make a big difference, and that's how we rewire, not from these big things or even from reading a book. It's almost, we are going to rewire through the doing. And so I'm hoping people who hear that know that like the little things do matter a lot. So even if it feels silly to do, give it a shot, because doing these things, let's say for 12 weeks or however many weeks or months you do it, you'll look back like, oh my gosh, that changed my way of being in my body. And I just never believed that, but it can.
Yeah, the little things matter, but it's also important to not take that too far and to think, I need to do every little thing perfectly or else I'm failing, right? I mean, I know
absolutely.
You know that. Just want to make sure we're being clear. It's definitely not, this is not intended to, add on to anyone's struggles with perfectionism or anything like that. So,
and the thing is, you won't do it perfectly, because sometimes I try to get grounded. I'm like, this is feeling hard today. And so you just go to the place that feels good, and that's where you hang out, and that's what you do. And that's more than good enough.
And what's so awesome about this is that when you do quote unquote fail, that's how you learn, right? So when you do have a day where something's harder than usual, or where you really just don't do what you wished you would have done, or where things just get really difficult to deal with, whatever situation comes up for you, rather than feeling like, oh, I've totally failed, I think it's just important to reflect on the fact that, that literally is how we learn. Pain is the way that we make progress. And so, that's, I don't know. I've been thinking about that concept a lot lately. I think that that's an important thing to bring up here is the little things matter, but when the little things don't go right, that's another opportunity to figure something else out about yourself and to take you further.
Well, what I notice is that if it's usually a sign that I need to slow down a notch.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. So you imagine you have a dial in your chest of like, a couple of different dials. I always think about turning the dial up in my chest of like, okay, being more loving towards myself a notch. And the other notch is like, let's slow down. Because maybe I'm pushing this too fast, too hard. I need another piece, and being curious about that.
That's awesome, Tracy. Thanks so much for sharing all of this. This has been a really great conversation. Take a minute to talk about your work and where people can find you and keep in touch with you.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I have a website. It's tracybrownrd.com. I'm on all the social media, Instagram, Facebook, just, again, putting out free videos and articles and Again, hopeful, inspirational stuff, practical stuff, everything. You'll see the theme of my stuff is really about a lot of decoding and embodiment and nervous system work along with the intuitive eating, just to make it feel more alive and real in our bodies, because sometimes our minds know, but our bodies aren't there yet. So we have to help our bodies. And that's what kind of my focus is. And I work with people in groups and in one-on-one, and, again, have some really accessible things for people who need to get started or who want to dip their toe in, whatever that is. So that's where you can find me. And I see people all over, not just in Florida, but online as well through coaching and body image coaching and intuitive eating and somatic stuff. So if any of that feels good to you, then I'd be happy to chat. And I'm just excited that if you're listening to this, you made it to the end of this podcast. So I really hope you got some really useful stuff from what we talked about.
Well, I know I did. I mean, this has been really great, Tracey, to get to know you and to learn from you and hear your perspective on these things. I think that this has been a really, really powerful conversation. So I'm just grateful that you were able to spend some time with me today. So thank you.
Well, Paige, thank you. And again, thank you for doing this. I think I shared with you that, when I was starting to do recovery in 1996, there was like 2 books. And like I said, I was really fortunate to have a powerful relationship with my nutrition therapist. But if not for that, who knows how long it would take me to get here. And so you providing this platform for people to learn, know what's possible, get some nuggets that get them more ready to receive more help, whatever it is. I mean, that's such a gift. So thank you for offering that. I know this is, what's the right word? Just a labor of love for you too. So I appreciate it.
It is a labor of love, and I do really care about my listeners, and it's people like you who come on and make the content happen. So it's a team thing, and I appreciate you being a part of it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Well, I sincerely hope you've enjoyed this conversation. If you haven't already, please go ahead and leave a review on iTunes. Thanks again so much for listening, and we'll see you soon for another episode.